Very happy to talk about anything like that. I'm very happy to talk anyway,
Great.
with you guys.
Excellent.
And everyone's joining us, so welcome everyone.
Wonderful.
My two favourite fellows. Don't tell the rest of them though.
Hello, everyone who have just joined us. I think we're going to wait for a couple of minutes to wait for others to come on, and then Scott's going to do an intro. But would it be useful if people put their names and their workplaces or employers in the chat to say hello to everyone else?
That would be
great.
Useful
thing to do?
Yes, I think so.
Please.
That's a great idea, Tony. Can see some familiar names.
Yeah, we've got some people that have been on webinars before. We've got Dahlia there. Hi, Dahlia. We've got Suzanne Usman, who's just been made a fellow of the IEP. Well done, Suzanne. That's great to see you again there. If I don't name check you, don't tell me off. We've got, who else have we got here that I recognise? Gareth Wilson, who's been an omnipresent of our webinars. Anthony Langdon, I know from back in the day. Hi, Anthony. Jeff Greenidge, who's a board member of the IEPs with us today. That's fantastic. Jules Pickering, I've just had a call with her, so it's really good to welcome you, Jules. Thank you for being here. And lots of other people.
So yeah, like I said, we'll just give it another minute or so, because we had something like 100 registrations, but I'm not sure how many people have entered the room. Is that the right thing to say? Not sure.
We're up to 55 already, so still a few more to come.
Hi there, the inimitable Tina Lacey. Really nice to see you. Avril, yeah. Tina Lacey's joining us. Hi, Tina.
Mike Perkins. Hello, Mike. Haven't spoke to you for years. Hope you're well.
And Megan's here, and I think another colleague from Leeds as well, who's fantastic.
As I say, don't be upset if you haven't been name checked. Just get engaged with us. Loads of chats there, Tony. Lots of people saying where they're from.
Yeah, that's lovely. Should just say as well, and we'll do this in the intro, so I'll be repeating myself, but this is an interactive session, so we want to see comments, questions, compliments on my shirt in the chat.
Compliments on my flamingo. Sorry,
yeah. But we'll repeat that after Scott's done his intro.
Hi there, Lawrence from Red 5 People. Great to have you on board.
Wonderful.
As I say, good to see Gareth Wilson there from Mancunia.
Mancunia, great stuff. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Rebecca Smith, I know very well from Papua Trust. Well done. Welcome, Rebecca. Super. Okay. I think we're close there. Should we make a start, guys? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, look, for those of you that don't know me, I'm the face behind the avatar that doesn't normally look anything like me, but is far too complimentary. But I'm the chief exec of the Institute of Employability Professionals. It's really great to have you all here for what is our 18th webinar in this series. And we're still not jaded, and we've still got new stuff, and we're still really excited about the learning we're bringing to you in this brave new world, as it were. I'm joined today by Joe and Tony, and they're talking about employer engagement, art or science, and they've got more information to give you in a moment. And Joe and Tony are in my top 5 fellows of the Institute of Employability Professionals.
Am I above Joe in that list?
Well, Tony, it's
just tell me
to say. I mean, you know,
joint maybe.
Yeah, clearly, yes. But if there are any other fellows on the call, then I apologise profusely for that. But you could be in the top 5. But there you go. So we're talking about employer engagement, art or science, second in our series with Joe and Tony. Really happy to have them back here again. We've got lots and lots of webinars in the series. As I say, this is number 18. If you want to learn about coaching, mentoring, virtual first aid, oh my goodness, suicide prevention, mental health. I mean, pretty much anything you can think of, then you need to engage with these on a Wednesday, and often now on a Tuesday and Thursday, but absolutely fundamentally on a Wednesday at lunchtime. So thank you very much for those people that are returning. If you want to see any of our webinars back, please go to the IEP YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the chat very, very soon. And make sure that you stay well, stay safe. Be very proud about what you're doing under a time of real crisis. The economy will recover because of your interventions and your practice. It's really important to remember that you are a linchpin in that activity, and we're very proud of all of you that work alongside the IEP and do this job. That's not always easy. Please make sure when you go to the YouTube channel, you click on the tab, you click on subscribe, so you get notifications of all the different webinars that are going on, and when they've been done, you can watch them back again. And please, most people at the moment have already done this, but click on the chat to say everyone in meeting, and everyone can see what you're saying, unless you want to say something very specific and very private to an individual. In that case, do not click on everyone in meeting, because it may be slightly embarrassing. Okay, so get chatting, get engaging. Really great to have you here again. And over to Joe and Tony for today's session. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So let me just do this. Joe, you can let me know whether that's worked.
Yeah, I can see it.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got the first slide up.
Got it. Yep. Excellent. Okay. So the title of today's session, it's Employer Engagement Art or Science Part 2, but we're also calling it From Employer Enragement to Employer Engagement. And we'll be advocating for approaches that meet the needs of businesses. And I should say here that I don't know whether he's on the call, but Paul Anders from Public Health England, who I've known for some years and who we've been doing some work with on the individual placement and support alcohol and drug addiction sites. He actually did coin this phrase, as far as I know, employer enragement. So we have kind of pinched it. So thank you, Paul. But it really summarizes for Tony and I what we think some of the issues are, which we've talked about previously, but we'll also remind people of today.
So just as a bit of a reminder, in our first session, we had a bit of an overview of, I guess, a lot of Joe's research, which I think we'll make the links available at the end of this session as well. Well worth a read, particularly if you're like Joe and I, which are employer engagement enthusiasts. Actually, Joe, we didn't really introduce ourselves. So, I'm Tony Carr. I'm the director of an organisation called Forefront Partners. I work with organisations that operate in employability and skills and related sectors. And the majority of what I do is around business development and service improvement, that sort of stuff. And I am an employer engagement enthusiast.
And my name's Jo Ingold, and I am also an employer engagement enthusiast, so much so that I completely forget to even say who I am because I'm so keen to talk about employer engagement. I'm an associate professor at Leeds University Business School, a fellow of the IEP, and my research over the last 9 years has focused specifically on employer engagement, and I've built probably, Tony always tells me I undersell this, I've built probably the largest evidence base that there currently is internationally on employer engagement, and also I've had a couple of decades of working around the employment support area, both in DWP and other organisations as well. So it's something I've got an interest in the sector and employment support more broadly as well.
Lovely. So yes, as I mentioned, and as Scott also mentioned in his introduction, we've already done one of these on behalf of the IEP. So go back to the YouTube channel, watch that through with popcorn or whatever you like, and you'll see some of the introduction to Joe's very, very good research and some of the conversations we started around co-opetition, which we're going to go through heavily today. So sorry, you're going to get the evangelicals talking about co-opetition and collaboration today. And we also talked a little bit about lead generation and consulting last time. As you can imagine, it's very difficult to put, the real detail of employer engagement processes and best practice into short webinars. So we try and give a bit of a flavor. We try and give a bit of a kind of introduction and a conversation starter. But one thing Joe and I are always keen to point out is that, you know, we might be enthusiasts, but we're not necessarily experts. And we hope that on this call, we've got a kind of community of experts. And honestly, one of our missions right now is to try and bring this community to support one another and to collaborate and to give the businesses that we serve an ever increasing level of support and get them more involved in employability programs. So I'll move on. So we've got a few themes today. We're going to start with a very quick look at consultative selling. Joe's going to take us through some very important stuff around persuasion, which is really important for the work we do. And then we want to have a conversation at the end about the impact of COVID-19. So we're not going to tell you what the impact of COVID-19 has been on what we do. So in the chat, if you can scroll up in your chat, I've lost my chat because I'm screen sharing, but there is a question posed in there and we'd really like you to answer that question, and we will pick up the answers at the end and we'll discuss them. And the question is, words to the effect of, how has COVID-19 and the lockdown associated with it impacted on your employer engagement activity? And I guess the reason we want to ask that question, two reasons really. One, we want to kind of gain a bit of kind of almost research feedback to say what's happened in the sector around this, you know, this crazy past few months. But secondly, and this is not necessarily a question which we've posed, but secondly, we want to share where people have had, good experiences or how they've managed to pivot what they were doing previously and apply the kind of employer engagement activity perhaps in a different way. So let's have that conversation. Sorry, that was a long introduction. So, come on screen.
Tony, just to clarify, is the question in the chat? I couldn't see it.
The question is it right at the beginning of the chat?
Right, I need to scroll.
But maybe
see it.
Maybe you could type it in again because I can't do the chat whilst I'm screen sharing.
No, yeah, it's not there that I can see at all. So it may be. It's not at the top.
It is there. It's right at the start, but I'll type it back in for
right,
everyone.
Thanks, Helen. For some reason, it's not the first thing I can see is your. Yeah, apologies if I've missed that. Great.
User error, Joe.
User error.
So. A really quick bit to revisit consultative selling. Now, I guess I have the benefit of not necessarily working directly in employer engagement anymore and therefore not working for a provider, so I can say certain things that some people can't. But I think Joe's with me on this, we want people to stop talking about their products. We want people to stop picking up the phone and saying you should have an apprenticeship because it's a government target, or do you want a traineeship, or could you take this niche individual demographic group because you should be supporting them. Because we want people to start thinking about what is really going on in the businesses in their local area, or if you recruit across the country, you know, everyone has slightly different ways that they're doing employer engagement, and to do this, I think there's lessons that can be learned from consultative selling. So it's kind of more about not having a target of promoting your product, but actually having a target of creating a relationship and an understanding of the businesses in your area. Where I've seen this work really well is where you have really good employer engagement consultants or equivalent roles going out, meeting or talking to employers and asking questions about their business. So really getting a sense of what's going on within their business. And some examples of this, I'm sure others, you know, can happily add into the chat, but simple questions to try and gain an understanding of an employer's business, such as, you know, what's your business going to be doing in the next 12 to 18 months? Do you, where do you think the pinch points are in your business? How are you responding to COVID-19? You know, asking more questions more generally about them rather than saying, this is the work and health program, we'd like you to take one of our people. You know, I'm simplifying and generalizing a little bit there. But the second point there is about identifying the needs, because within consultative selling, the premise is that you can better fit your solution if you truly understand the needs of your customer. It's quite simple in that respect. So some organizations work well with things called organizational needs analyses. So that acronym there that I've put in the bullet point, ONA. If you haven't got one of these, Google it. You might see that it's sometimes called training needs analysis, but an organizational needs analysis is slightly more broader than a training needs analysis. And some of them are quite large, but you might find that when you look at these things, they'll give you really good hints and tips for how you can engage with businesses and truly get an understanding of what they need. A bit later in this webinar, we're going to be talking about collaboration and co-opetition. And one of the things that's really important about identifying needs is that I think it's true to say, in many respects, if you have a conversation with an employer, you're probably running a program which doesn't completely meet their needs. And therefore, it's quite useful to be having perhaps a team of collaborators or collaborative organizations working together to truly fulfill local business needs. We'll come on to that in more detail because it's something that we want people to embrace and to take on, and we've got a bit of a homework assignment for you at the end as well. So I think I've said all I wanted to say on that, unless Joe has got anything to add.
Just to pick up on some of the things that are coming through in the chat, which we'll pick up on later, but some comments that really speak to what you were saying there, Tony, about building relationships and building relationships that have been built up pre-COVID. Now, I think Ant was saying that have now really paid off, and then and also using this time as a sort of check-in support function for businesses, and we'll say more about that, I think, as well. But basically, that is a message that we'd really advocate, that when going out to businesses, it's not about, you've got your goals and your outcomes in mind, but don't let them override everything you do, thinking I've just got to get, come away with a vacancy. It's about building the relationship for the longer term. And we find from evidence and also people's experience that really pays off. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Joe. And that you have actually reminded me of a really good example. We're currently supporting Public Health England's IPS service for people with alcohol and drug dependency. What they have found is that it's common sense if you think about it, but if you're doing cold calling, for example, the chances of finding an employer with just the right vacancy at the right time of your call for the right person, it's pretty slim. So that creates a situation where you have to do multiple calls to find that one hit. But actually what they have found works far better is to build relationships under the realization and the acceptance that it's a timing thing. You get into a relationship with an employer, and at some point down the line, they will either come back to you, or you'll be there and you'll be on their radar, and they'll say, actually, I do need you right now. So I think that's really important, because I would advocate people getting away from the kind of older smashing the phones mentality of not only just employer engagement but sales as a whole, because I just think to work on the premise of getting one yes for 19 no's simply means that you've got 19 pissed off employers. So it's that whole employer enragement to employer engagement. Ta-da! Right, exactly. Joe, yes, over to you.
Yeah, we were talking about that because we in our conversation earlier with Public Health England, and that that enragement aspect, it was really critical. So we're not saying it's not a sales process, but we're saying it's thinking about it in a slightly different kind of business to business sales way. And in this vein, I'm going to talk through what are called the 6 shortcuts to influencing and persuading people, based on science going back about 30 years or so. Many of you may have seen this book, Influenced, by Robert Cialdini. So there's a lot of work around at the moment that you've seen around behavioral science and nudge and that kind of stuff. So and what's really striking about these 6 shortcuts is that, oh good, Helen, so I'm sure some of you may well have already read it. So what I'm going to do is do a kind of quick run through of the key facets of influence and persuasion, which really speak to the evidence I've got on employee engagement, and basically what Tony and I would advocate in terms of employee engagement approaches. So reciprocity is the first one. So the example given here is basically of mints being given by waiting staff to diners, which was found to increase the amount of tips that waiting staff received. So what we can tell from this is that even though mints, you could think, very low cost to the business, maybe no cost to the waiting staff perhaps, but that actually resulted in something of higher value to the waiting staff in the form of gratuities. So this is really important about when we think about employee engagement, because what we've got with employee engagement is a reciprocal relationship, or what we're striving for is a reciprocal relationship. And my research particularly has highlighted, and nobody had pointed this out before, and it may seem obvious to you guys out there doing this on the ground, but it's an exchange relationship. But of course, no money changes hands. You know, you're not delivering like a recruitment agency to a contract. As I said in the previous session, there's differences in terms of contract-based relationships and more arm's length-based relationships that don't rely on a contract. So, so for your employee engagement, you're dealing with employers that actually have quite a lot of power. They have power to decide whether they actually want to engage with you or not. So you've kind of got to make the case for that. You've got to build trust, and you've got to come to some kind of agreement between yourselves that really establishes what the employer needs and wants, and what they consider to be of high value, and within that you'll be thinking what you can provide. And actually there were some great examples that we found of say, for example, you could be offering training as part of a suite of contracts that you've got, some workplace training, and actually that's of really high value to the employer, but it might be actually of quite low value to you in terms of your contract portfolio. But actually what you're really looking for is a traineeship. But you know, I'm bringing it back to the products there, but I'm not saying that you should just have the products in mind, but it's really establishing what the other person thinks is high value to them. And sometimes that may be high value to you, sometimes it may be lower value, but it's really establishing really those sort of mutual goals. Anything you want to just chip in there, Tony?
No, that's good.
Is that all right? So yeah, but we're really keen on kind of promoting this idea of employee engagement as an exchange relationship, and importantly as a relationship, which again may seem obvious, but we think that it's still not as commonly understood as it should be. So we'll keep putting the message out there. So the next one is scarcity, and the example is of Concorde when that was running, and when they cut their flight schedule down, actually that increased demand. So it's your classic sort of supply demand that we know within the economy. You've basically got to convince the business of the benefits of what you are offering. So what is really important and scarce about what you are offering, that what can they get that they can't get from someone else, and you're basically making it easy from them as well. And ideally it's of course something that they want. It's not really about what you want that is overriding, although that'll be in the back of your mind. It's really finding out what the other person wants as well, building on that reciprocity aspect of what they feel is really valuable. Because there's no point going out there thinking, you know, what I want is to get a vacancy, but you know there isn't a vacancy with, you know, in this particular area that you're going out into, but you might not be able to get a vacancy on that day, but you will hopefully be able to establish a relationship that pays dividends and a return on investment for both parties down the line. So really, and one example we had for this is about for example, reasonable adjustments. A lot of organisations don't know about reasonable adjustments, particularly ones that don't have HR departments, or even some that do could maybe do with some enlightening in terms of disability. So, you know, you could offer disability training, for example, or training on reasonable adjustments, access to work. And that could be something that's incredibly high value to the organisation, but actually considerably, you know, low value in terms of your time, but might actually hopefully pay dividends to you down the line. And importantly, what you want to get across to the business is, what do they stand to lose if they don't consider it? And I don't mean a hard sell here. I mean, it's really demonstrating that value proposition of, what could they lose out on if they don't consider it? If you don't provide reasonable adjustments for your staff, you're going to have people going off on sick leave, you're going to lose them, it's going to cost your business money, and then you're going to have to look at replacing them, and recruitment is of course very costly. So those kinds of arguments come into it.
Oops.
Next, we've got authority. So, and this has come out interestingly in the work I've done and the conversations that we've been having about how actually people present themselves when they go out to employers. And there's never one way to do this. Sometimes people experience that selling, saying I'm from X organization or I'm working with DWP, that can play out well, it can play out not so well. So people have variable experiences. So the example here is simply of someone being, they found that someone dressed up as a traffic warden was able to, when a parking meter was out of order, they were actually given money by people parking their cars, because people assumed that because they were wearing a tabard and they looked official, that they were actually, the bona fide person. So really it's kind of exuding to others and signaling to them what makes you a credible and knowledgeable authority. And Tony and I feel really passionate about this, because we really feel, as Tony said at the beginning, that that the sector and you guys as practitioners and professionals are, it's not always known what great stuff you do. For example, I've been judging the URSA awards with a group of people from the business school who don't work at all in employability, but we're sponsoring one of the awards. And I say that just because what my colleagues found was that they were just blown away by all the nominations. And so I'm just using that as an example, that people who don't know about the sector, they just couldn't believe that this stuff was going on at all. And I think there's a lot of people out there who just don't realize what you guys, eat, sleep and breathe on a daily basis. And I think just remembering the importance of what you're doing, and I know we talk about it, but I genuinely can't emphasize that enough. And also that you have credibility, you have knowledge, about recruitment, about employability, what is it you can really offer to employers. There's a lot that you can offer businesses, and what you also want is for those businesses to go out and recommend you to others. So you want to provide a good service, you want to provide the candidates that they want. If things go wrong, you want to put it right, because the best sell is then for people to be going out and talking to whoever in their business networks about the great work that you do. And we found, certainly in our social network analysis, that was really important to employer engagement. So we've got evidence that backs that up.
I'd like to come in on this as well, because as you said, Jeff, we really believe in this. We've got to recognise that as a sector, the level of expertise across this sector is unparalleled. We've got disability experts, learning disability experts, we've got HR experts, all of these things that you do, almost like, you're experts in the services that we give to our customers or candidates or clients, whatever we call them in different organizations. That can be repackaged as a really useful service, and a service to businesses, I mean. So I'm going to give a couple of examples that have come in on the chat, because I think it's, people are responding to this. But a very quick example is, again, we're doing this work with the Public Health England IPS service, and there are 7 different pilots around the country. And where it works very well is where those people who are trying to help people with drug and alcohol issues move into employment, what they actually do is they go out and they run training sessions for businesses on, if your staff member presents with these sorts of issues, here are some helpful processes, links, resources and signposting stuff for you to help them. And it's a different way of helping to educate, because businesses aren't the experts in this sort of stuff. This sector is. And a quick example here from Rachel McGowan. We offer free disability training, advice on reasonable adjustments and the benefits of employing a diverse workforce. This builds a relationship for future vacancies. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay.
We'll give you a 5 at the end, Rachel. No, I'm joking. But no, it is important. Also, getting to line managers. You know, we know that line managers are on the front line with managing literally on a lot of these issues, and quite often organisations don't do enough to help line managers. So really, you know, offering this stuff, and you know, and people are not necessarily going to come knocking down your door because they don't know what can be provided. So it's getting out there and, you know, doing that consultative selling that Tony's talked about to ascertain the training organizational needs, and then you can put together a kind of package really that doesn't immediately have to say, you know, this is about getting a guaranteed interview or whatever. And then the next, I'm flagging up co-opetition again here, because a key to this is, of course, you've got your expertise within yourself, your organization, but that might not be, is likely not to be all of what a business will need. So there will be a need for you to engage and collaborate with both people who are your collaborators and people who are your competitors. But what we keep trying to get across is that you can offer a much better service and a much better offer to businesses if you offer something together with other organisations, and you demonstrate your knowledge of other stuff that's going on in the area. And again, it comes back to that authority of a trusted recommendation as well, that you can say, I can't do this, but I know Tony down the road and he can do this really well. So again, you're showing your authority and knowledge, and also being honest. I think honesty is so important in, you know, what we don't want to do is, of course, under promise and over promise and under deliver. We want to be doing the opposite. So, and then the next one, we're on to consistency. Nice cup of coffee there. This example was about basically how GP attendance at GP appointments was increased when patients wrote down their own appointments. So it was about kind of taking responsibility and sort of keeping in their minds, you know, the appointments is there, and there's that kind of connection. So there's something there for us, I think, in terms of the consistency of services, building a commitment, building a consistent, and that's what engagement is. That's what I've been really focused on measuring in this academic sense. And I get quite overexcited about kind of defining, and if you talk about employer involvement, talk about employer participation, talk about employer engagement, but actually engagement, we've found, is something very different to just, you know, one-off participation. I can take it or leave it, you know, in terms of an initiative that might help a business. What we're really looking for is that longer term commitment. And what the behavioral science tells us is that this consistency it's got to be voluntary, it's got to be active. They also say it's got to be public. Now, I'm not convinced about the last one, because the precursor to the research I've done is some seminal research within academia by some American scholars called Martin and Swank, and they basically did a study of the UK and Denmark about a decade before I did, more than, so time of the New Deals. They found that there were all these large organisations going into number 10. It was when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, of course, and they were making commitments, but they weren't followed through. So they were making public commitments, but not followed through. So I'm not quite so sure on the public aspect, apart from, obviously, it's, as I said before, having a recommendation, having a good news story where you can get a business to actually, you know, say, you know, this is what this organisation's done for us. So that could be important and useful. But for me, the really important thing is it's about the voluntariness of it. You can't, and this is my issue with policy, of course, is that policy in the UK, particularly in this space, makes lots of assumptions about businesses, while at the same time saying we don't want to be prescriptive and, you know, expect them to do anything. But actually, in putting, you know, in commissioning these programs, there is an implicit expectation that businesses will behave in a certain way. And as I've said before, unfortunately, some of the assumptions underlying those are actually flawed. But the important thing here is that business has what we call kind of monopsony power, so they can choose from any of the people out there in the market. So what we're looking for is to engage with them, to get them. The best thing, of course, that people always say is when you can give someone an idea and they make it their own. So you get them to really think, yeah, I really need this in my life. I need this service in my business, and they become active, and that's the engagement. Sorry, I'm getting very passionate here, aren't I, Tony?
It's lovely stuff.
I feel like we're on a mission. And then we've got the consensus. So that is the example that a lot of us have probably encountered if you stayed in the hotel back in the before times when we went away and stayed in hotels. And you'll see those little cards, you know, about encouraging you to reuse your towels. And some hotels have been experimenting with saying, you know, X percentage of people who stayed in this room reuse their towels, for example. Not so you think you're using someone else's towel that they've left, but it's kind of, you get the idea that it's kind of that idea of if somebody else is doing it, then maybe I should be thinking of doing this. This speaks to some really classic organizational studies literature about sort of institutional complementarities, and this idea that when someone does stuff in a sector, then other people will follow because there's that institutional kind of coming together of doing similar things. So the importance is, you know, be able to point to what another business is doing, especially if that business has a similarity to the business you're trying to engage with. So you can say, oh, actually, you know, we've been working with Bob, who produces widgets, and it so happens that Jane, who you're talking to, also runs a company that produces widgets. So it's kind of, again, making that connection. And even better, again, if you can get that recommendation and get to that point where people will recommend you.
And I guess just what I wanted to add on that point is the power of asking for a recommendation can be fantastic as well in this space. Having experienced it myself, you know, doing a good job for a business and asking them to refer you on pays dividends. It really does.
Yeah. And I think there's an example, especially when we think of, so it's fine to go on to, I was just going to connect that with, you know, if we think about the equality, diversity, inclusion space again, you know, there's loads of data out there showing the kind of business return on investment of really thinking about inclusion in the workplace, just as an example. So, you know, you can point to those kinds of benefits, so you then get that sort of weight of people just kind of moving in a particular direction. It happened with corporate social responsibility in the UK ahead of other countries like Denmark, actually, interestingly. So because there was a kind of weight of other people are doing it. So so finally we've got the likability. So basically the example, I'll come back. Yeah, I will say the example now. The example is some MBA students who were given tasks to go off and negotiate, because quite a lot of studies in business and management actually tend to be engaged with MBA students, particularly MBA students, but we can critique that on another time. So these students were given a task to go off and negotiate. One group of them was told time is money. The other group were just told go off and negotiate. And the group that was told time is money managed only 55% of them managed to actually come to some kind of successful negotiation, whereas those that weren't given that instruction, were 90% of those were able to come to a successful negotiation. So it was those that were able to go out and kind of let go of that outcome, not feel pressured, but actually exchange information, work on mutual goals, work cooperatively perhaps. And so the idea here is that people want to be liked. People like to be liked. Well, most people do. Of course, there are exceptions, as we know in the world. Most people like to actually cooperate and agree mutual goals. Again, you know, maybe there were some examples we can think of in leaders in the world that we think maybe they don't work like that. But also people like to like people who are similar to them. We see it in, you know, relationships, you know, people looking for those connections. You know, we're human beings where we kind of look for those connections. So the selling point here is it's about the attributes and the behaviors that you bring to employer engagement, and that gets us into the space, particularly of where the IEP works, thinking about those skills that are really required for employer engagement. And also thinking in the virtual world, that how this can take place, how we can get across these behaviours, how we can demonstrate actually the other 5 shortcuts I've talked about before this, what that means in the virtual context as well. So that's why we were interested to hear a bit more about your experiences during COVID in terms of engaging with businesses. So final one, nice one to end on, is the likability. And then I think we've got another little sweetener about competition.
I was just going to say about likability though as well, is that, you know, how much more are you going to like someone who calls you up and starts a human conversation rather than someone saying, have you got any vacancies? Sorry, I'm just being a little bit provocative there, but it's true. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, you're making that connection, aren't you? You're showing an interest in people, and being curious is what we've been talking about, isn't it, Tony? That's the motto of the week. Be curious.
Be curious.
Which I definitely am.
So, Jo, do you want me to introduce this and you can chip in, because you've just wonderful talking there. You can have a look at the chat. No. So I suppose this is, you know, we will be really open about this. We think the providers of employability and skill services are have a difficult task on their hand anyway. But the commissioning environment also means that lots of different services are all in the same location, and they're all commissioned differently, and often you're in competition with one another. It can be, you know, sometimes it's easier to pull up the drawbridge on your own service rather than to collaborate with others. But we want people to get beyond that. We want people to think about how working with what might be termed competitors could actually be more beneficial for them in their services to businesses. So we talk about competition, and we talk about it a hell of a lot actually. But we think there are real benefits for providers of employment and skills services when they collaborate with similar type organisations. So we're doing another sort of mini project with York City Council at the moment, where they're doing just this. They're bringing together as many of the employment and skills services in the city of York together to come up with a kind of almost principles of how they will support one another to deliver the individual programs that they've been commissioned to deliver. And it's only at the starting point, but they've already started to see how one sort of bit of their service fits beautifully with something that a training provider is doing down the road. And suddenly that becomes a greater offer. You can perhaps fulfill businesses' needs more if you've got several different kind of products and services. But the concept here is about how you can work with what might be competitors to be more complementers. So Jo, you're the scientist. You explain the science.
Oh, okay. So the science behind it. So there's a famous book called Co-Opetition by Nailbuff and Brandenburger, and lots of other people have talked about it as well. So there's various examples we can find in business where it basically has been shown that not in all circumstances you have to ascertain, but we think the employability sector and employer engagement is a really excellent candidate for working cooperatively. So basically the idea is that if your offer is more valuable by joining up with someone else, and the person the business you're selling to will value that product. Again, we can't get away from the product, but will value your product more when they have your offer along with the other person's offer, then you really should be collaborating. So examples, I suppose we could probably all prompt you actually to think of an example when you've honestly not been able to meet an employer's requirements, and to think whether you did go out and join up with another organization, or whether actually you didn't, and if you didn't, why you didn't. I know in some of our research we found that there were issues around things like establishing mutual goals with your collaborating organisation. So that comes into it. Obviously you've got to know what organisation you need to do this mapping in order to know the other organisations that are out there, and also you need to have a sense of what they can deliver as well. You don't obviously want to be referring people on to an organisation that doesn't deliver, or maybe doesn't deliver well. So that does come into it too. So we really sort of challenge you here to come up to really think about how this can apply, or has applied, or could have applied in previous contexts. I was just caught up, Tony, in the chat there. I was so struck, and I just have to read this out by a comment from Stu. An ex-manager of mine started out selling Hoovers door to door, blasted his targets because he hadn't been told what they were. Then his manager told him that they were surprised he was selling 30 a month because his targets were only 15. And then guess what? After that, he couldn't sell more than 15 a month, no matter what he did. So really good evidence there. And there is more, that letting go of the outcome is, so having those, well, we've said before, haven't we, what gets measured gets delivered, maybe not always, but that's then the focus. It becomes the overriding goal, isn't it? And although yes, commissioners are obviously directing organisations' actions in terms of what they commission, but really this is our challenge to you on the ground, that can you do things differently? Yes, we know that programmes are not always commissioned in the best way, and we keep pushing the case for thinking about businesses in the commissioning stage, but we really, and we don't think that people on the ground should always be retrofitting their activities to make up for deficiencies in the commissioning process. But at the same time, we really would like you to think about your offer, and particularly how you manage targets within your organisations, both as individuals and across teams, etc. Tony, back to you.
Yeah, so Joe's already, I suppose, started the process of introducing. Sorry, we called it a homework assignment. Who? No one wants a homework assignment. No, this is a suggestion, right? Because and it's wonderful to see in the chat some people are already talking about how they do collaborate with their complementers, not competitors. But we think this is something that I suppose the market as a whole can do better. There are pockets, as clearly pointing out in the chat, that they do it. But we think, if you're operating in, for example, a particular labour market, and so I was talking about York previously, work out, what is the labour market that you are servicing, or perhaps several labour markets. Identify other organisations in that labour market who are offering similar services to businesses. Go and get in touch with them, right? Go and get in touch with them. Work out what their offer is. You're not going saying, please can I have all your employer contacts, because they probably won't let you. But work out what their offer is. Work out whether it complements what you're doing. And if possible, think about how you might collaborate on a future piece of work. And it doesn't have to be, wrapped up in T's and C's and stuff like this. This can be pretty organic. Mike Perkins, for example, in the chat is saying, I have always worked in partnership. It makes sense if you're a specialist. It broadens your offer to a customer. As an independent training provider, we cannot be great at everything. So having relationships with other similar organizations is a logical step, which is wonderful. And thank you, Mike, for sharing. But I guess Joe and I would really like the providers in our space to be trying to do some of this stuff on the ground. Like Joe said, it's not always ideal how things are commissioned, but there are really good pockets of people collaborating. If you want help with this sort of activity, please get in touch with me. Perhaps not Joe, because I know how busy Joe is. I'm more than happy to talk with people about how they might do this within their local space, because I'm really passionate about this. I think everyone can benefit from this. Rather than not filling a vacancy, work out how you can employ a need. Anyway, so anything to add on that, Joe?
No, I think that's covered it. The challenge is, please go and do this. We really would like to see what you come out with and have some, or let us know if you're already doing it. As Tony said at the beginning, what we'd really love is to build a community of practice in this area, to really build and share good practices as well. That's what we're doing with the Public Health England piece, and we'd like to do more of that across the sector as well. Really, really good examples of what's going well, people being honest about the challenges that they're facing, and offering kind of that peer learning, really.
I'm now going off script, Joe, but I guess Joe and I helped to facilitate an IHRSA forum on employer engagement. And if you're not already sort of engaged with that, please go to the IHRSA website, sign up to the next employer engagement session. I forget the date, and Joe probably knows.
19th of August, I think it is.
19th of August.
Yeah.
So that's where we can start to facilitate some of this kind of collaboration. But I'm also thinking as well, if people can suggest better ideas than this, right? Because I'm not sure this is the best way, but we can set up a kind of LinkedIn group for this group on this call, and perhaps other employer engagement professionals out there, and perhaps we can start to facilitate that kind of virtual conversation beyond this webinar. I'm not sure what anyone thinks about that. We're now going to open it up to some of the questions we had and some of the comments in the chat. Shall we, Joe, do you want to start with our original comment around COVID-19, or should we pick up some of the things people are saying?
I think maybe I just wanted to pick up some things. We're just getting some on the collaboration piece. We don't confess to be able to do everything. We can certainly add value to other wider projects. As someone who's a specialist wanting to, saying they agree that they can collaborate really effectively. Some great examples of partnership working there, and people recognizing that has actually worked for them, has delivered, which is really, really great to see. Yeah, and then I think given time, it would be good, I think, just to go back and think about the COVID challenges and experiences that are coming out as well. So as I mentioned earlier, some positive experiences reflected there about relationships paying off, about providing support, taking the opportunity to go out and meet employers, presumably virtually or largely, but also and taking the time to understand what businesses can't do at the moment, which is certainly what we found with the piece of work with York City Council, that that was, we were working with them, as Tony said, to map the business offer and to get organisations to agree collaborative working principles, but also to talk about what they thought would be business needs and why and how they knew this. So that's important, not making assumptions. But what came out of that was actually businesses needing to rethink their business models, to think about pivoting their business post-COVID. But actually they'd not really thought much about it or hadn't got a clue. So again, that's where you can, to use my word, swoop in the nicest possible way and help them out with that. So some of the stuff coming out in the chat really reflects that. And also, you think about the examples coming out as well for training opportunity, training that you do against something else that you can deliver at this time. And Helen, thank you for saying get your questions in now, given timing.
Penny Lowe has added an amazing question, which I think is to the entire group. In your experience, what is the best way to make contact with employers? I mean, wow, huge. I think it really depends on a number of different factors. It could be the type of industry that you're looking to connect with. The type of decision maker that you're looking to engage within that organization. It's such a big question. I'm not going to be able to answer it. I mean, please, if people have got answers to the $1 million penny question. $1 million penny question. In your experience, what is the best way to make contact with employers?
And they will see. Sue, thank you for that. They're saying you get on the old school, getting on the phones, but always from a support point of view, not the kind of sales conversion thing, which is, so we're not saying, using the phone is not allowed, but just thinking about, that idea of, getting people on the phones, have a day, everybody hit the phones, that's your employee engagement day. I think that's what we're not advocating, isn't it, Tony, in terms of focusing on that conversion sales as a, let's see, everybody will do however many hundreds of calls and then we assume we'll get this out of it. It's really letting go of that. And I also wanted to come back to getting to the decision maker, which is a similar point. Any tips on getting through to the right person, getting past the gatekeeper effectively? I thought I'd seen that. I think I'm not. Some of my questions are not appearing. There was definitely a question there about getting.
I think I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting question as well. And yeah, you want the decision maker. So whether that's a line manager or hiring manager, it could be head of HR. It really depends on the size and type of the organization. But doing your research first is I think really important, because then you're just wasting time getting stuck perhaps with a receptionist or someone who's told not to put calls through if it's someone trying to do recruitment or sell something.
And it's doing your background research. But again, Suzanne, how do we get past the person answering the phone to the person who actually makes the decisions? Well, I suppose it's partly thinking of working out who that is, isn't it? Gathering information, however, which may be Tony, you've got experience in this, I'm sure more than me on the ground, actually using maybe the initial phone call. Maybe you could find some information out about
well we had a conversation a bit earlier with a guy who we think is really good at this sort of stuff, and he never goes in asking for the person who's hiring or the vacancies. He always has a reason to call around either, we're running workshops in this area, providing information, advice and guidance for employers who might be experiencing this with their staff. Who would be the best person in your organization to attend? It's a slightly different question.
So you're going in and you're offering something. Again, it's that sort of reciprocity, isn't it? It's not,
it's not,
you give me this. It's not, I want this, can you give me that kind of, And Mike, thanks for suggesting that. This is great evidence that there's a group. I think someone already said that setting up a LinkedIn group would be good. So I think these kind of questions and, hive mind on this is brilliant, because as Tony said at the beginning, we don't have all the answers. I've got this evidence, Tony's got a wealth of experience, but there's so much that we can learn from each other. Best word, to identify the employer's pain and demonstrate. Yes, definitely. Asking the person, what's a real issue for you at the moment? What's causing you pain? What's
keeping you awake at night?
What's keeping you awake at night? Yes.
Pain points are very, very useful ways of leveraging conversations, because you're really getting to the real need. Helen, absolutely. Who's probably on mute, but can we, if it's okay, whilst we've still got most people on, can we email people afterwards with details of a LinkedIn group or other ways of connecting?
Absolutely, yes. We will be emailing everyone anyway with the link for the YouTube recording, because there's been so much fantastic stuff discussed today. I think people will want to go revisit some of it, and we can include some details on that. So if you get that over to me, we can make sure we do that. If not today, if it takes a little bit longer to set the group up, we can do it as soon as we've got that group set up.
Thanks, Helen. And just say, Jason, thank you for that's not the first time I've heard about targeting professional services people like accountants. So that's smart stuff. That works. Walk the territory. I've been saying this to Tony because I'm a bit nosy and curious. I've missed so much just getting out and about and being sort of tied to my laptop all day, every day, and just not being around. Even though I'm not even a recruiter or working, to get people into jobs directly, I always notice, if people they're opening up a shop, they're hiring, those kind of things. You're all alive to this.
Okay, great
looking
session.
At the time here.
I know, you knew I was going to do
Helen.
that then, Tony, didn't you?
But let's keep the conversation going.
Yes, definitely. So I believe we're going to hand back over to Scott. As I said, I'll make sure we collate all the information and we do share with people the links to the YouTube site. And this has been a really engaging and really interactive session, so it's been wonderful. And I've popped something in the chat just to remind everyone, all of our members, you can, these webinars, especially when they're insanely interactive like this and we're sharing lots of ideas, can be logged as CPD via the website. So please make sure you're going on there, everybody, and logging it. And on that line, we actually have a webinar around CPD tomorrow. So if anyone's free at the same time tomorrow, I'm just popping that into the chat box as well. So if you can join us for that, that would be great. But thank you both. It's been really wonderful.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Yeah.
Hi everybody, well I'm back again. Thank you very much, Joe and Tony. Really enlightening, really interesting session as we've found is now the norm of the IEP webinar series. Just remind you to go onto the IEP YouTube channel. You can share, have a look at all the other webinars we've had in the series, and this one will be there this afternoon. So go along, engage. Please click the subscribe button and then you get told about all the new things that are available there. And get acting with, get involved with the IEP. Go along to www.myiep.uk and you'll be able to get engaging if you're not already doing so. I know I can see a lot of people that I already know on this list here, so well done. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a massive difference. It's really important to the state of the economy and our recovery. And please stay safe. Make sure whatever you're doing in practice, you're keeping yourselves safe. And keep interacting. So thanks very much to Joe and Tony. Once again, very informative. My two favourite fellows, or at least in my top 50, in my top 50 of fellows. But
we've dropped.
A fantastic
another
job.
Another 45 in the last hour.
Well done, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.